One of the most commonly asked questions when it comes to fitness is, how do I know if I should bulk, cut, or recomp? And the answer to this, like almost everything else regarding fitness, is that it depends, and it depends on a couple of different things. But before I get into that, real quickly, let me just introduce myself. My name is Alphonse. Here we talk about how to maximize results from your training with as little time in the gym and with as little risk of injury as possible. Now, like I said, it depends on a couple of different things, and ultimately it depends on what will make you the most happy. How would you like to look? And also realistically, how can you look? Do you have realistic expectations on how you can look? Whenever you are thinking about changing anything about your body composition, you have to have a pretty good idea on where you are starting from. What is your starting point? The vast majority of people underestimate how much fat they have and overestimate how much muscle mass they have. And so therefore they underestimate how much fat they need to lose in order to get to their desired level of leanness. A lot of people also overestimate how quickly they will be able to build muscle. Let's say, for example, that someone says that they want to build 10 pounds of muscle in 6 months. Maybe they can build that amount of muscle in 6 months. And maybe they can't. It all depends on their genetics. And unfortunately, we can't decide how quickly our body will allow us to build muscle. Because again, it's dictated by our genetics. You can decide to focus on building muscle, but you don't get to decide how quickly you build that muscle. All you really can do is to dial in your training, your nutrition, your recovery, and keep accurate records of your workouts, measure and record everything that you are doing, evaluate your progress, and then make adjustments based on those evaluations. And if you think this sounds complicated, I discuss how to do this a lot more in detail in my 2 videos about how to create your own workout program, which I'm going to link down in the description. But anyways, now that we talked about that and we all understand it, what do you then do if you are unsure whether you should bulk or whether you should cut? Now, the answer to this question almost every single time is that, if you're in that kind of in-between space where you don't have a lot of definition, but you also don't have as much muscle as you would like to, is that you should probably be cutting. And the reason for this is that, again, the vast majority of people underestimate how much fat they have and overestimate how much muscle they have. And again, if you are in that in-between space where you're not quite sure whether you should bulk or you should cut, chances are that you have enough body fat that you would have a greater improvement in your appearance if you cut as opposed to if you bulked. And the few people who would look better if they first focused on bulking, on building muscle, as opposed to cutting, are those who are a little bit more kind of on the border. They still have, they're still relatively lean, they still have, some definition. You can still see kind of where one muscle starts and where it ends, but they're not like completely smooth. And so those people probably would have a greater improvement in their appearance if they first focused on, bulking, on building muscle. But another reason why I recommend most people should cut if they are unsure whether they should bulk or cut is that if you get relatively lean first, it's going to be a lot easier to see later when you then bulk and focus more on building muscle if the weight that you are gaining is mostly muscle or mostly fat. For example, let's say you are 200 pounds and you have 20 pounds of body fat. That's 10% body fat. Now I know most people are not going to be 200 pounds, 10% body fat, but I'm just using this example to make the math simple. But for the sake of this explanation, let's say that's you. You are 200 pounds and you have 20 pounds of body fat. Each pound of fat that you gain or that you lose at that point is going to be a 5% increase or reduction in your fat mass. That is going to be a lot more noticeable than if you gained a pound of fat when you were, say, 20 or 30 or above % body fat, since each pound of fat that you gain if you are a even higher body fat percentage is going to be a much smaller increase in the percentage of your fat mass, and so it's not going to be as noticeable in the mirror. Now, if you then were to bulk when you are that lean, it would be a lot easier to notice if the weight that you are gaining on your bulk is mostly fat or mostly muscle, since you are much leaner and each pound of fat you gain is going to be a much larger percentage increase in your fat mass. And so if you gain 2 pounds on the scale and you look in the mirror and you know you've been 10% body fat before, if you just gain 2 pounds of fat, that's going to be a lot more noticeable looking at yourself in the mirror. But if you gain 2 pounds of muscle, well, then that would also be a lot more noticeable, since it's not going to be under all of that fat that you would have if you were a much higher percent body fat. Now, lastly, RECOMP. When would you want to do a RECOMP, which is the action of, attempting to build muscle and lose fat simultaneously? Unfortunately, there is going to be very few cases where a RECOMP is going to be effective. A RECOMP would be a great thing if everyone always could build muscle and lose fat at the same time, but unfortunately that's not always possible. However, if you are a beginner, or if you are building back muscle that you have lost, or if you are overweight, you're over fat, you have too much body fat, a RECOMP can actually be effective in those situations. But for almost everyone else who are not in those specific situations, it's going to be extremely difficult and extremely slow to do a RECOMP. It would be a lot more effective for most other people to just pick one or the other, either bulking, focusing on building muscle, or cutting, focusing on losing body fat, and then just do the other one afterwards. But anyways guys, that's all for this video. I really hope you liked it, and if you found this video even a little bit useful, please don't forget to leave at least a like on this video. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, also don't forget to click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you can be notified the next time I upload. And yeah, with that being said, like always, I'll see you boys in the next video next time. Peace.